Hi, everybody. This, of course, is the Empowering Democracy show, and I'm your host, Joe Firestone. And our topic for this live stream is stopping the immediate threat to Social Security. Some of you might be thinking, what? The immediate threat to Social Security? Where is that immediate threat coming from? What is it? Well, we will answer that question presently. Oh, by the way, this is the second update of Empowering Democracy Today. The first one was at 2 o'clock, and you can see it as a video, of course. Going back to the threat to Social Security, I will share a piece for you on that. Someone is watching. Don't know who you are yet because you haven't commented, but if you're here, then please do share. That would be greatly appreciated. And like and subscribe as well if you haven't already done so. I'm going to share an article now which appeared in Common Dreams. Let me get it into the stream. Oh, hey, it went right into the stream. That's good. I usually have to do it myself, but that's very good. I'm so glad it did. Well, here is a picture of Congressman Jason Smith, a Republican of Missouri, speaking at a House Republican news conference on September 28, 2021. This was from Roll Call. This article appeared, I think I already said, in Common Dreams. It's called Social Security, quote, in grave danger, unquote, if GOP retakes Congress, advocates warn. So that's the first hint of how you can block it. Just make sure the GOP doesn't win the House. If you care about Social Security, if that's an overriding interest, then that's an overriding reason not to vote Republican when you go to the polls. Or when you do your absentee ballot, or when you vote early. Social Security, this is by Jake Johnson, by the way, on October 11, 2022. Sorry about my throat, it's a little hoarse today. Social Security and Medicare defenders warned Tuesday that the popular government programs will be, quote, in grave danger, unquote, if Republicans win control of Congress in the upcoming midterms, pointing to new reporting on GOP plans to use a looming fight over the nation's debt ceiling to pursue benefit cuts. So that immediately tells you the Republicans may try to do what they did with some degree of success in 2011 and in 2012, and what they attempted to do, but with less success in the intervening period between 2012 and now. In other words, they will manufacture a debt ceiling crisis and try to cut back on spending and on benefits that help people. Jake says, citing interviews with 4 House Republicans hoping to serve as chair of the chamber's budget committee, Bloomberg government reported that Social Security and Medicare eligibility changes, spending caps, and safety net work requirements are among the top priorities for the GOP. In other words, they want to impose work requirements where there are now none, increase the requirements where there are now some, change the eligibility rules for Social Security and Medicare, impose spending caps where there are now none. Those are among the top things they want to do if the GOP retakes the House in the November elections. And Representatives Jason Smith, Republican Missouri, Jody Arrington, Republican of Texas, Buddy Carter, Republican of Georgia, and Lloyd Smucker, Republican of Pennsylvania. Notice 4 Republicans there, not a single Democrat among them. I should say here that I think most of the Democrats are terrible, and I think most of the Republicans are terrible too. Members of both parties are terrible, but there are differences between the parties. One of the differences is the Republicans are looking to cut Social Security, and the Democrats, by and large, right now, are looking to either keep it the same or increase it or expand it. So that is a difference between the two parties. They're trying to do is use the next debt ceiling deadline to raise or suspend the debt ceiling and use that as a point of leverage to extract concessions from Democrats, including potentially raising the retirement age and reducing Social Security benefits, the outlet has noted. Such a strategy would fit with the House GOP's recently released policy agenda, which opens the door to Social Security and Medicare cuts. So that's in the policy agenda of the Republican Party in the House. Something Republican candidates have repeatedly hinted at on the campaign trail, despite the program's popularity. In other words, they want to do what people don't want them to do, what most people don't want them to do. Our main focus has got to be on non-discretionary. It's got to be on entitlements, Carter said to Bloomberg government on Tuesday. And in a statement, Social Security Works President Nancy Altman stressed that, quote, entitlements, unquote, is a term with pejorative underpinnings, unquote, that Republicans frequently use in hopes that voters don't understand what they're saying, unquote. I have to comment on what Nancy Altman said there. I once spoke to her about this. I believe she unwisely did not listen to me. I pointed out that when you're entitled to something, that means you have a right to that thing. And to have a right to something doesn't have a pejorative connotation. For years and years and years, people who advocate for Social Security, such as Nancy Altman and others, have just accepted the Republican success in turning the word entitlement against us all. It's always the easy thing to do in the immediate context. But from the standpoint of the long-term effect of using such a strategy of communication, it has a lot of costs because now there is a pejorative underpinning under the word entitlement. It did not used to have a pejorative underpinning. It has that now because the supporters of Social Security have not tried to fight for it. It's a right, and I get very, very angry when people try to take a right away from me. By the way, women are entitled to abortions if they want one. In my view, that means they have a right to it. It is a right. If Republicans use the word entitlement in a pejorative way, then Democrats and others should immediately reply and say, oh, you want to take away one of our rights. Is that correct? An entitlement is a right. You want to take away one of our rights. We're sick and tired of you taking away our rights. We're going to kick you out so you can't take away our rights any longer. But it's clear what their intentions are. Reaching into the American people's pockets and stealing their hard-earned benefits, said Altman. And Nancy's right about that. Quote, Republicans plan to use the debt limit as the hostage to demand these cuts, even though Social Security doesn't add a single penny to the deficit. If Republicans take control of one or both chambers of Congress, our earned benefits are in grave danger. And I agree with that too. That's right. If they take control of the House, I think especially, but in general, if they take control of both chambers of Congress, they do intend to cut or privatize Social Security if they get a chance. They've wanted to do that since Social Security was passed. The debt limit is a completely arbitrary figure, says Jake Johnson, that establishes the amount of money the Treasury Department is legally allowed to borrow to cover U.S. financial obligations. Yes, it's completely arbitrary. It establishes the amount of money that the Treasury Department can legally borrow, but it has to be said that it is the legal amount of money because of what Congress did at some earlier time. That legal amount of money can be changed anytime Congress wishes to change it. It can be changed by the Democrats now. In fact, even more than that, the whole debt limit law, the whole debt ceiling can be repealed for good by Democrats now while they have a majority in both bodies of Congress. And we ought to call on them to get rid of the debt ceiling entirely. And if they don't do it, we ought to blame them for not doing it. The debt ceiling has no function except to give Republicans leverage to extract concessions from Democrats. Now, why would any serious political party want to give an opposing party that kind of leverage? It seems to me the Democrats are involved in collusion. As long as the debt ceiling remains intact, failure to raise it once the Treasury Department reaches its borrowing limit could result in a default and a financial crisis. That's true. The Treasury is set to hit its current borrowing limit early next year. But there are steps that can be taken to prevent that. First of all, is the step I mentioned. The Democrats could pass a bill right now, and if they feel uncomfortable about passing a bill right now because there's an election coming up and they have an irrational fear that that would become an issue in the election, I think the fear is totally irrational. But even if they have that fear, they could, right after the election, they could repeal the debt ceiling law entirely in the lame duck Congress. They could say, we should have done this long ago. It's stupid. It provides a basis for the Republicans to extract concessions from us, and we're not having it any longer. We're getting rid of it. So they can do it now before the election. They can do it after the election, when people will certainly forget that they've done it. Nobody will be bothering them in 2024 because they got rid of the debt limit. That's one thing they could do. There's something else Joe Biden could do right now. What Joe Biden could do is to order the Secretary of the Treasury to order the mint to mint $100 trillion coin and deposit that $100 trillion coin in the Mint's Public Enterprise Fund account at the New York Fed, from which the Treasury will then sweep that account for the seigniorage, which is almost the whole $100 trillion, to get that money into the Treasury general account, which is the Treasury spending account. If Joe Biden does that, then the Treasury Department won't have to issue any more debt when the borrowing limit is reached. In fact, when the Treasury Department repays the debt that is owed, the Treasury Department would be gradually paying down that debt. So, for example, in 1 year, most probably one half of the debt would be paid off, because an awful lot of the debt is very short-term debt, maybe 3-month debt, 6-month debt, 9-month debt, or 1-year debt. A lot of the 31 trillion is that kind of debt, so it would be paid off in a year's time, maybe 50% of it. I haven't looked it up exactly, but a very large percentage of it would be paid off. At that point, if the Treasury wanted to issue more debt instruments, it could do so, because it would only be halfway to the debt limit. In other words, if you use the coin, the debt limit law would effectively be a dead letter for a long time to come. Going on, though, with this piece by Jake Johnson, in recent years, Republicans have used recurring debt ceiling fights as opportunities to push spending cuts and other austerity measures, and it appears as if they plan to draw from the same playbook once again following the November midterms. Well, they won't be able to draw from that actually until January, because the Democrats will still ostensibly control the Congress after November 8th for the remainder of the year, of the calendar year. Anyway, quote, Republican politicians are dripping with animosity towards our Social Security and Medicare, unquote, Nancy Altman said on Tuesday. And, quote, even with an election less than a month away, they can't stop themselves from talking about their burning desire to cut and end these so-called entitlements. Once again, Nancy They are entitlements, which is to say they are rights. Why don't you make that clear in your communications? Why don't you start saying that all the time? Alex Lawson, why don't you start saying that all the time? Why don't you start pointing out that an entitlement is a right and that the Republicans are trying to take away a right which the American people now enjoy? That's a powerful message. Time to hit the Republicans with it. Time for every Democrat to say, you're in favor of taking away one of our rights. And the Republican will say, oh, yeah, what right is that? And then you say, the right to a dignified retirement. That's the way you do it. That's the way you communicated it. And Social Security Works tweeted, even with an election a month away, Republican politicians can't stop talking about their burning desire to cut Social Security. That's how much they hate our earned benefits, which we have a right to. There are earned benefits, we have a right to them because we earn them. If Republicans take control of Congress, Social Security is in grave danger. I completely agree with that. It is in grave danger. They've wanted to get it since the sainted FDR passed it in the first place. Going on in a column last month, the Washington Post's Greg Sargent explained that Democrats have the power to prevent the GOP from weaponizing the debt ceiling to push Social Security cuts and other elements of their right-wing agenda. Short of eliminating the debt ceiling entirely, as some Democrats have advocated, like me, quote, they can use the reconciliation process. Oh, another fancy thing the Democrats can do. They can use the reconciliation process to pass a 2023 budget outline with only Democrats and no Republicans, which would allow them to raise the debt limit, again, without Republican support, to an amount unlikely to be reached for President Joe Biden's full term and well beyond. That's another thing they could do. They could raise the debt limit to $100 trillion. That would be pretty much like repealing the debt limit, wouldn't it? Entirely. They could do that. Why don't they do that? If the Republicans grouse about too much, they could say, okay, we'll compromise with you. We'll put it at 50 trillion. How's that? I don't think the Republicans would like that much, but the Democrats could say, we met them halfway. We compromised. If Democrats don't use their power to act against this threat, Sargent wrote, it will be a serious dereliction of duty, unquote. Well, they've been derelict in their duty so many times over so many years that they're probably going to be derelict in their duty again. There's a very good chance. But why don't we try to minimize that chance by pressuring Joe Biden, having a public outcry for Joe Biden to mint the $100 trillion coin? That power lies in his hands alone. And that would take the power away from the Republicans of having debt ceiling crises for the foreseeable future. Now, I know the Republicans could retaliate once they take over Congress in January by changing the law back so there is a debt ceiling limit. But by then, the cow would be out of the barn because there would be $100 trillion plus money in the Treasury spending account. In other words, the deed would have been done once that money is in the Treasury spending account. There's no taking it back. The Republicans would just have to live with it. And that would be the end result of doing the $100 trillion coin. And that's why it's better to do that than simply to repeal, the debt ceiling. You can repeal the debt ceiling, but if the Republicans take over the House and the Senate, they can impose the debt ceiling again next year. They can't take back the $100 trillion once it's in the Treasury spending account. I don't see how that could possibly be done. And I don't see why the public would stand for it. Once you make clear that one of the benefits of having the $100 trillion in the Treasury spending account is that all the money is there necessary to pay the debt when it falls due. Once the American people realize the money is already in the account to pay the debt, they will cease to worry about the debt. They will cease to worry about its size. Debt terrorism would be over. So, think about how that would strengthen our democracy. With debt terrorism over, we could go on and easily advocate for a Green New Deal, easily advocate for Medicare for all, easily advocate for child tax credits. And anytime the Republicans say, oh, that's too expensive, we just say, the money is in the Treasury spending account right now. It's right there, sitting there. We can afford this. We can afford this. Having that money there does a lot for the people, does a lot for the political power of the people. We got to get Joe Biden to do this, folks. He has the authority. He can do it. If he does it, he doesn't have to fight next year with the Republicans over the debt ceiling, even if they win the House. I don't think they're going to win the Senate. But even if they win the House, they would still not have the debt ceiling excuse to cut things that people want. Conversely, if Biden doesn't do this, and there is a situation created where they cut entitlements or various other things, then they won't be the only ones to blame. Biden will be partly to blame because he did not mint the $100 trillion coin. So that's all I have to say about this one. There will be a third update of Empowering Democracy at 9 o'clock tonight. And what's on tap then is to talk about John Fetterman's campaign for the Senate and the very creepy attacks he's been getting. The latest one, evidently, from, what's it called? Morning in America or something? I'm not sure, folks. It's been so long since I watched that piece of junk. We'll talk to you at 9 p.m. this evening about that. Have a great dinner and have a great time until then. Okay, I'm out for the present.